Can you hear me okay? Great. So just as a little bit of a background for myself, I was, as I'm fond of saying, I was conceived, born, and raised on Salt Spring Island. I had three children. I now have three grandchildren on the island, and have been involved in the community in various different ways over the past 30 years. One of those ways was being elected to be Islands trustee in 2002 to 2005. Basically, I ran on the platform of tax equity for Salt Spring and also to try and deal with the affordable housing problem. We were having a crisis at that time and a crisis that has gone on unabated since. With respect to the policy changes that are being proposed by the trust and the time frame on it, um, I'm just struck by the fact that I am not aware of any of the trustees, either on Salt Spring or on any of the other islands, that ran on the platform of these policy changes. These are not small policy changes. They're obviously the fact that this community right now that is watching this has come to the conclusion that there are challenges with these policies that are being proposed. I what I believe at this point is that those policies need to be put off to the election next year and have any of the proponents of them run on that platform. That if they would like to promote those policies, they're certainly well described by now. They can run on those platforms, and if they're elected, and if in the case of the Islands Trust Council, the majority of trustees are elected on those policy platforms, then so be it. At least the electorate then have a say in it. With respect to the electorate, I've become aware a number of times that trustees and people who look to trustees have a misconception over what trustees actually are. The definition of a local trustee in the Islands Trust Act is someone who is elected to represent the electors of their Islands Trust area. This is an important acknowledgement of what their duties are. Their duties are to us as the electorate to represent our interests to the trust. The trust is the Islands Trust Act. So there seems to be a propensity for some trustees to believe that they were elected to represent the Islands Trust. And I've had conversations with some trustees who have told me exactly that, well, they didn't understand that they were elected to represent the electorate. With respect to the issues that are important within the Islands Trust area, as Elizabeth mentioned, affordable housing is the number one issue. There is no other greater issue. Climate change is not a greater issue. Douglas fir forest is not a greater issue. Having private docks is not a greater issue. None of those are a greater issue than the crisis that continues to worsen and has considerably worsened over this last 3 or 4 years. And we are at the point now where the prophecy that I've put forward for about 2 decades now, that the Islands Trust is preserving and protecting the islands for a bunch of rich people who have not yet been born, is coming true. In order on Salt Spring Island to purchase a single family home now, you need to have about $200,000 income in order to afford a median home on Salt Spring. It is totally out of the reach of middle income. We have a new hospital extension that is going on Salt Spring, and we will not have any housing for those employees that are supposedly going to be taking care of that. The trust, and when I say the trust, I'm speaking of trust council at this point. Trust council needs to narrow their focus to the things that need to be done in the short term and not have the long list of strategic objectives that seems every term they come up with 20 or 25 strategic objectives, very few of which ever get resolved and are just basically a make work in my opinion, a make-work program. There are solutions to community housing. Whistler Housing Authority has dealt with those over the years and have the solutions. The solutions are not impossible. They are totally doable, but they are not easy to be done. They require courage from the trustees, from the people that we elect to support our needs as a community, because without addressing this problem, we will have no community. And you only have to look as far as Nantucket Island or Martha's Vineyard or Vail, Colorado, in order to see that what happens when you have a place of high demand and low supply. Currently on Salt Spring, there are less than 10 bare land lots for sale and something in the neighborhood of 50 to 60 homes. So to address those issues, that is what our trustees, that is what Trust Council should be dealing with. We cannot solve the climate crisis. China's use of coal, certainly India's use of carbon-based energy will vastly outweigh anything that we can possibly do on Salt Spring or throughout the trust area. What we can do, though, is we can solve the affordable housing issue. With respect to policy, there's one other issue that is indicative of the problem with the trust, and that's the policy that is not currently being followed with respect to application processing. And that I brought to Trust Council's attention in March of 2020. Currently, $2 million a year are wasted through inefficiency of application processing. Those aren't my figures. Those are basically the mathematical calculations coming from the trust itself. That is a result of trust staff not following trust policy that was set in 1993. And when I brought it to Trust Council's attention in March of 2020, Trust Council asked staff, well, is that true? Have you been following policy or not? 3 months later, the Director of Local Planning Services came back to Trust Council and said, no, they're not following policy because it's impossible to follow policy. So we're led to believe that for 27 years, staff had found it impossible to follow policy, and yet the taxpayers were picking up $2 million a year. Those kinds of issues of governance need to be addressed long before and look at changing a policy to of the kinds that are being proposed right now. So I would call upon the trustees, that the 13 or 14 trustees who voted to delay the policy decisions until December, to come together and say, listen, we've heard the public. We believe that the public really wants to have a say in it. And the best way to do that is to have it as in essence, a mini referendum next November by having the trustees who are running for office run on that platform and let them live or die on that platform. So I think that's about all I've got to say. I'm open for any questions for any of the things that I have said or anything else. So Miel, I'll pass it back to you.